before I forget, once I forgot to record the webinar and then I had to redo it again afterwards so we could send the recording out. So never again. But I'll get this show in the road. We do want to make sure we get in and out in 30 minutes. But just to introduce ourselves first, my name is Bethany. I do marketing and communication for Broadreach. So, social media, our emails, our website, it's all me behind the scenes. And then our real kind of expert with us today is Carly. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great. My name is Carly. I've been with Broadreach now for 13 years. I just celebrated my 13th anniversary since I started working here. I do lots of things here, mostly talking with families, doing some travel planning, and I know a lot about all of our programs. And I'm happy to share some of the conversation topics that I speak with parents about most often today, and hopefully get some questions answered. This is me in Peru, from one of the first Broadreach programs I joined as an observer years
Both of
ago.
us with some cuddly critters there. Well, maybe not
Yes.
too cuddly, but at least cute.
Yes.
All right. So I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Broadreach. We've been around for over 30 years, running adventures for middle school and high school students. We've been around long enough that now we're starting to see students who are like children of former instructors or children of former students, which is really awesome. And I think kind of shows the impact Broadreach has had. And our owner and director is actually was a student on the very first Broadreach trip, which is pretty cool too. But we specialize in trips focusing on marine biology, scuba diving, sailing, veterinary medicine, and conservation. A little bit of an overview of what we're going to go over today. Carly talks a lot to parents. These are the questions that we get all the time. So we'll talk about how traveling to and from program works, how students are supported and supervised on program, a little bit what daily life looks like on program, sleeping, food and dietary needs, how safety works, our approach to risk management, how we prepare and handle unexpected situations. Communication with parents during program is a huge one. Just a little bit of a mention of why people end up choosing Broadreach. And then we'll have some time. We have some pre-submitted questions. And then if you think of questions along the way, we have a Q&A box, so you can drop those there. We may cover them beforehand, but go ahead and leave them there. And if we don't, we'll get to them at the end. Getting started, how do students get to and from program, Carly?
This is a question and a topic we talk about a lot with parents, and something that I think most parents are at least a little bit nervous about, even if your student has traveled before. The idea of sending them on an airplane to an international destination on their own, most cases, is a little nerve-wracking, which we totally understand. I was a travel agent for 6 years before I started working for Broadreach, and so I know quite a lot of the ins and outs of how airline itineraries and unaccompanied minor service in particular work. So I'm always happy to talk through particular situations of from where you're coming from and trying to get to and how that all gets set up. But generally speaking, students will have an arrival window for their program. So we'll say, for example, please arrive into St. Martin on your program start date between 12 and 5 in the afternoon. That's just an example for some of our Caribbean programs. And then students travel mostly on their own from their home cities to the program destination. For the example of St. Martin, we have multiple sessions that are starting on the same day. And so sometimes students will run into each other in the airport along the way if they're connecting in Miami, for example, or other places. And we send them all Broadreach t-shirts to wear on travel day, which helps them pick each other out in the airports, which I think is really great. Yep, these ones followed their instructions and wore their Broadreach shirts for travel day. And so they're traveling independently. Sometimes they will run into other students along the way. We try to keep it as flexible as we can so that families can book what works well for them. We don't have required flights for most of our programs because that's often less convenient than a direct flight from your home city, if that's an option. We have sometimes families that will travel down with their student to the program destination. They don't see each other during the program. The parents will go off and do their own thing. sometimes staying for the program duration and flying back, sometimes just dropping their students off. Sometimes parents will fly to the connection city, like Miami, for example, to get their student on the international flight on their own. So we try to keep it flexible. I think the most important things to note are that we are here 24 hours a day during the summer to help with any issues that come up. We provide a lot of information in advance about what to expect on travel day. Who to look for. We send pictures of their instructors who will be waiting for them at their destination airport so they know exactly who to look for. And then we have students call home when they arrive so that you know that they got to the right people and the right place and all is well. Um, Again, we're around to answer questions if you have them along the way. Typically, that process goes really smoothly because we put so much time into preparing it and because we have so much experience in traveling to these destinations and helping families get their teenagers to these destinations. And it's a really great, independence building activity. I think it's something that students feel really confident once they've, completed that travel day on their own, which
Yeah,
is
for
part of
sure.
Broadreach in general.
Yeah, for sure. It's like already starting like the growth from the very first moment.
Yes, exactly.
That said, once they get there, they will have the support and supervision, of course, of our awesome instructors. Can you tell us a little bit about our instructors, what kind of qualifications they have, that sort of thing?
Yeah, for sure. Our average age of our instructors is something around 27 years old. And so they average a bit older and more experienced and mature than like a typical, college undergraduate student who's just looking for a fun summer gig. Depending on the program and what specific position they're hired for, they'll have different qualifications, which also kind of lends to that older age. Our academic programs have an academic instructor who has at least a master's degree in that subject area. They're conducting the academic course of the program. The scuba instructor for our scuba programs has to have at least a PADI open water scuba instructor certification. So not like a high level scuba certification, but an instructor scuba certification so that they're certified to teach students how to dive and to learn how to dive. And then for our skippers, there are a few different types of certifications that we look for, and a lot of that is experience based as well. I think something that we do that not all other organizations do, in addition to, of course, interviews and background checks and reference checks and things like that in our hiring process, is that we do like a full in-person week-long training with our instructors, which looks different depending on where they're going and what they're doing. But it allows us to really evaluate their skills and their strengths and their personalities so that we know, that they are qualified, not just on paper to lead a Broadreach program, but we've seen it in action as well. It also helps them learn what our expectations are and what a Broadreach program looks like. And so they're not leading groups of students without having that sort of full training in person. Um, Shall I go on and answer some of these other questions on the left?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think last summer we had over 50% of our instructors that were returning
Yes.
as well, which is awesome because
Yeah.
they already, are familiar with Broadreach. Sometimes even former students will come back as instructors. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. I actually said that to a parent yesterday, that especially in the last few years, I've been around Broadreach for 13 years. The last few years, the return instructor rate, I think, has gotten higher and higher. I think instructors value working with us and the experience that they have working with students, or they wouldn't come back. So that's an important relationship that we pay attention to so that we have those amazing instructors come back year after year. And like you said, sometimes they've come up as students into being instructors and really have a full understanding from lots of perspectives of what Broadreach is about.
I love seeing that.
Right. They're
What's this?
often from other countries
Oh, yeah.
as well, which I meant to mention. I don't know the percentages, but I think something like a third or up to a half of our instructors are from outside of the US, a lot from Canada and the UK. But that allows us to really tap into those like most ideal candidates in terms of skills and experience. And it's fun to get to know someone from a different
Yeah.
country.
And they have lots of experience with international travel. So,
Yes, exactly.
what's the student to staff ratio?
That varies a bit depending on the program. Our student group sizes are typically between 8 and 12 students, depending on the program. And then the instructors are either two or three that are with them the entire time. I think it's important to note that our instructors are with our students all the time on these programs. And so the person who's teaching them how to scuba dive or is going white rafting with them or whatever they're doing on their program is someone that they've just had breakfast with. When I went and did my scuba certification with Broadreach the first summer I worked here, I was nervous about it, and I really liked having a little bit of a relationship with the instructor already. The trust was already starting to be built even at the very beginning of the program. And so that like small ratio and the fact that our students aren't like going to a different boat or a different group to do their scuba instruction, I think really speaks to the relationship building that comes between students and staff or instructors.
Yeah, for sure. How do instructors typically deal with homesickness or other challenges that students might need support for?
That is a question we get. And I think that we address it both in our in-person instructor training where we talk about things like homesickness that might come up. Also some tools and group dynamics things to look for. I think that's another like frequent question or challenge that can come up on some programs. So not only are they've got some tools in their tool belt already to help with those things, but they have the support of us in the office with lots of experience with different scenarios where we can talk to them and suggest things if students are homesick. Usually, homesickness is kind of an early program situation with our younger students, and it will dissipate after the first couple of days. We'll talk about communication a little bit later in this presentation, but we can always put students in touch with parents or vice versa if necessary. That's not always the best cure for homesickness. Sometimes being reminded of what they're missing out on at home doesn't help them focus on their experience and what they're looking forward to in the program. But certainly something that we can talk through. The instructors are checking in with students both individually and as a group throughout their programs. And because it's such a small group, they're pretty accessible in terms of being able to see the students and see who maybe needs a little extra one-on-one conversation and making that feel, organic so that they're supported.
Yeah, there's lots of built-in kind of check-ins and things that we do, or well, that instructors do.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to another huge question we get. Where do students sleep? I know this is going to vary depending on whether they're on a Caribbean voyage or not, but in general, can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, for sure. The picture here on the right, I think, is really interesting because it does show an example of what sleeping on some of our boat-based programs looks like. I tell people it's not, excuse me, um, it's not, it's a very communal living, family style situation where they're often sleeping like this out on the cool Caribbean breeze at night. It is like quite literally the coolest place to sleep on a boat because you've got that air circulation that isn't really in the cabins. A brief description of our boats for those boat-based programs, which I know not all of you are probably looking at. We have catamarans for most of our programs that have four cabins with heads or bathrooms that are attached to each of them. We split those up between girls and boys. They're mostly using those for changing and for storing their things. They could sleep there if they wanted to, but they don't generally opt to because it's so much more comfortable. Either on the deck of the boat, like what you see here, or there's a common area with like couch benches that's inside the catamaran, and then also like an outdoor kind of covered shared space that has benches on it that sometimes they'll opt to sleep on. Some of them have the trampolines like this in the front, and some of them have a different configuration with like kind of another set of couches where you can put out your sleeping pad and sleeping bag. Um, but generally speaking, the instructors and the students are like in different parts of the boat. Sometimes they'll have like girls areas for one night and then they'll switch and then it'll be the boys area for the next night if there's like coveted spots on the boat where they're very excited to sleep. It is quite magical to wake up under the sun with the sun coming up in the morning and students I think even the ones who think that they're not excited about getting up early in the morning or might be a little bit groggy in the morning can get into the rhythm of what boat life looks like with this sleeping on the boat. we're a little bit away from shore, and so we're not having like bug issues, and it's really beautiful. And I think a lot of students come out of that with it being a highlight, that different sleeping experience. On the boat, on the non-boat based programs, it really depends, but generally they're staying at kind of like smaller family-run guest houses or smaller hotels. Sometimes they're staying in private villas. Sometimes they're staying in research station dorms if we're really getting focused and hands-on in what a research station life looks like, which is really exciting for the students who choose those programs. And so the main point, I guess, is that it's not the Ritz-Carlton. They're not ever going to have like their own room or like a fancy environment, but it's also not tent camping and it's not meant to be roughing it. We want our students to have sleep so that they have energy for what they're doing. And that's something that we check in with them about as well to make sure that they're comfortable during the program.
Yeah. But I think you kind of covered the next one already about what the accommodations are like. And I will say if you
Yeah.
have concerns about a specific program, then feel free to reach out to us and ask like, hey, what is it like if you're worried, and we're happy to go into more detail.
Yeah, for sure.
What is a typical day on Broadreach?
Mm.
This is a hard
We
one.
do get, yeah, we do get that question a lot. And of course, the answer is there is no typical day on Broadreach. Every day is going to be different. Our days are designed to be busy. And so we have different activities and things that are going on throughout the day on all of our programs. It's not meant to be like a sun tanning vacation where they're just kind of like laying around and not doing anything interesting all day long, which I think is great. They're pretty active. And again, this varies kind of based on the program and what they're actually doing. Um, as I mentioned, they're often getting up a little bit early and then also going to bed earlier than what they might be doing, at least during the summertime at home. They get into more of those like circadian rhythms and take advantage of the daylight hours to do things. Um, they are doing a whole blend of different activities depending on the program. And a lot of time that is like some learning component, whether that's scuba certification or academics, or like working with a veterinarian, for example, to learn about a particular animal that they're working with. Um, there is often some component of either preparing meals or cleaning up after meals or like tidying up a house if they're staying in a private villa. Yeah, contributing to the comfort of the group so that they're kind of in a family style, different responsibilities set up. And then there's lots of fun too. Fun is not the last thing I mentioned because it's the least important, but I think it's the easiest part to do and maybe the thing that we have the most in common with some other organizations. But fun is something that's super important to us. And of course, that the students always take away from our programs is the different activities. This on the right is this amazing hike that we do. I believe they're in Eel Force on that one on a lot of our Caribbean programs. You can like see out to all of these different islands, and often we try to do it at sunset, which is pretty magical. So little hikes and things like that. We have water sports in some of our programs. Um, and the challenge component, I think, is something that's important to note. We often do something that's a little bit challenging, at least in the beginning part of our program. And the function of that, which I've seen in a lot of our groups, is that when students are doing something that feels different and a little bit challenging together, it's an extremely powerful bonding experience. So whether that's like whitewater rafting or zip lining or doing a hike like this or starting out with scuba diving, that challenge component at the beginning really accelerates the friendship process because you've just done something and overcome some sort of fears or nervousness together. And I love seeing that happen on our programs.
Yes, that's awesome. It's another kind of growth
Yeah.
component. Another huge part of daily life that we didn't mention in this previous slide is food. Um, what is the food like? Can we accommodate different dietary restrictions or allergies?
Yeah, I think we've gotten really good in the last, decade that I've been here at accommodating different preferences and allergies. We are very communicative in the enrollment process about families that have those sorts of situations, and then with follow-ups in our medical forums and our sort of enrollment process, and making sure we know exactly what a student um, can tolerate or what kind of allergies and things we need to avoid. We have had peanut-free or nut-free boats or in the past, which is something that is feasible. We've had students that keep kosher. We've had students that are vegan. looks a little bit different on different programs, but a lot of our programs where we're doing the cooking, we make things very customizable, like kind of the taco night that you see in the picture on the right side, so that people can customize it based on what they like. If you don't like salsa, don't use salsa. If you don't eat cheese, you don't have to put cheese on your tacos. And so we try to really accommodate those meals for different preferences and allergies, I think in a successful way. Again, as I mentioned before, we want students to have the energy to do the things that we're doing in our programs. And so getting enough food is very important to us. And the instructors are watching what students are eating so that they know and can talk about whether they're getting enough food or not on their programs. There are other programs where they'll eat out more or have meals that are prepared by our partners. And again, we communicate dietary restrictions in a very, I think, successful way so that we can accommodate most restrictions. Um, I do want to note that bottom picture, they're not drinking beer. I think those are
Yeah,
sodas.
yeah. I was looking at that too. I was like, we should say something.
I was like, that looks fun. Those are beers. Cool. So yeah, talk to us about the any dietary concerns that you might have. Even like picky eaters, I think, are usually very successful in our programs as long as we know what they can and can't eat in advance. Places like Costa Rica eat lots of rice and beans. I think we do a really good job of preparing students kind of what to expect about that. But in general, food is important. I love food. I've eaten a lot of weird things, some on Broadreach programs, and we're happy to talk about food if you have
Yeah.
other questions.
We try and keep a balance between trying some new things and also like having some comfort snacks and meals and stuff so it's not too
Yes.
overwhelming. And we make sure everyone gets enough to eat.
Yes, for sure. Very important. No hangry kids.
Yes. All right. Safety and risk management. How do we kind of manage risk on program and prepare for the unexpected?
Yeah, definitely a big question. I think it's important to know that we have risk managements in place from like the broadest level of things that are extreme and we never expect to happen, but we will know what to do if they do, to the more like accessible level of this is where the closest hospital is to where you are during each step of your journey. This is a clinic that we've gone to in the past. This doctor is great. These are resources that you have if you have a different situation. This is a taxi company you can call at the last minute if you need to get somewhere. So our instructors are very prepared with different resources to help in the case of an emergency or a non-emergency, just kind of a situation where they need to maybe get a kid to a doctor or something. Um, I think something that is we value quite a lot is our relationship with our in-country partners, and that can be invaluable both prior to the program, so all during the year as we're preparing for our programs and talking to our outfitters and our hotel partners and places like that to assess and reassess. So not just because something has been safe before do we assume that it's going to continue to be an appropriate environment for our students, but to sort of revisit what we're doing and making sure that we're minimizing risk as much as possible. Travel has inherent risk to it. Driving has inherent risks. Going down the street in your city has inherent risks, right? So there's risks that are going to be there, and our job and a responsibility we take very seriously is managing those and minimizing them wherever possible. If we have a situation where we need to get help for whatever situation that happens to be, we know exactly what to do. And again, our instructors have the resources of us in the office with many, many years of experience, 24 hours a day. If they just have a question, if there's a situation that is emerging that we need to assist with, and we are always able to get in touch with parents if that's something that they need to be involved in. So um, I I'm very proud of the safety record that we have over the last 30 some years that we've been running programs. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think we put a lot of effort into making our programs as safe as possible, and we wouldn't be still able to offer these kinds of adventures to students if we weren't continuing to put safety, at the front of our planning. So
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add is that we also kind of try and involve the students in helping. We have like a leader of the day and kind of try and keep their awareness. What do we need to do to prepare? Do we need for simple things like sunscreen, making sure we bring plenty of water, things like that, which I think is a great kind of opportunity for them also to be. thinking about those things and kind of developing
Mm.
those leadership skills.
Preparing them to be adults and to be aware of their safety also. Great
Yes.
skill.
Awesome. What about, this is a huge one, I think, for both students and parents, communicating with home. Do students, are they able to bring their phones on program? How do they get in touch with their parents if they need something? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I'll kind of answer this briefly because we have a really good blog post that we did recently about why we unplug on our programs and kind of what communication looks like that we'll share the link to in the follow-up email after this recording. But the short answer, I mentioned already that they always call home when they arrive so that you know that they've made it there safely and to the right people. And then we hold on to their phones during the program. So it is not meant to be like a full blackout of communication. If they need to get in touch with you or you need to get in touch with them, we can make that happen if needed. They have an opportunity to call home usually once a week during the program, depending on the program duration. Um, and we will give them their phones back, of course, and remind them to charge them for their travel home. One thing I think that is like amusing to a lot of families is that then they don't have their camera with them, their phone for camera or their phone for music. And so often they'll bring like a either disposable camera or like a, inexpensive digital camera to take pictures during the program, and like an old MP3 player or something that's a music device if music is something that's important to them.
An iPod,
Um,
if you remember those.
an iPod, you can load an iPod with songs. Um, I talk to more and more students now, students directly that are really excited about the opportunity to unplug. And parents too, for the most part, I think are really on board with the idea of focusing on the experience, taking a break from the technology. And it's not like you can't talk to them. We're also, Bethany mentioned Leader of the Day. The Leader of the Day is writing a sort of blog post and taking pictures with the group phone on most days so they can upload those and share them with you. You'll get emails with them with that information throughout the program so you can kind of see what they're doing without being in direct communication, which I think is really great for a lot of parents. Proof of life, everything is good. Here's my kid smiling. Um,
Pictures
so
worth a
that's a
thousand
great,
words.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think we've gotten, I have to say, I think we've gotten really good at getting plenty of pictures with
yeah,
instructor phones or whatever and uploading those daily or as often as possible.
yeah, yeah.
Right. And just one last little, why do parents and students choose Broadreach? What is special about Broadreach?
I think the fun and the skill building are like I kind of mentioned before, the easy parts of this. So we can have students open their worldview and be on an amazing adventure, and learn new things. Those are all really powerful parts of our programs. But I think maybe what I hear from parents at the end of the summer that they're most surprised about is the soft skill building that happens on our programs, which is like not coincidental. It's intentional, focus that we have in our programs, whether the students know that they're doing it or not. But through the Leader of the Day, they have those leadership opportunities. They have some major buy-in and sense of responsibility because they're taking turns either cooking or preparing meals or just taking care of their space and their surroundings in different ways. And that like independence and confidence that comes out of an experience like this are I think what translate the most into normal life. Being around other students who share something that they're passionate about is really powerful. Being around students who are maybe not from their like normal bubble or where they've grown up, they get to kind of be themselves and get to know people in a very different way than I think they're used to. I think those are I could go on for a long time about of the value of our programs and kind of why parents and what I've heard throughout the years that parents have said to us, but a lot of it is really around those independence, responsibility, confidence building, um, yeah,
Yeah, it's such
exercises
a
and
great opportunity to
experiences.
like leave your kind of your like little bubble where you're defined when you already have your friends and just branch out a little bit, connect with other kids based on those experiences, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we've already got some awesome questions in the Q&A box. If you think of any more, then now's the time to drop those in. I will just quickly mention we do have a promo going on now through the end of the weekend. So that's through the end of the day Sunday, which is February 1st already, February,
Oh,
with the code FAQ 250. And I wrote Carly's email here, C Hill or chill at growbroadreach.com. Easy to remember.
yeah.
We have one question about laundry. Are there opportunities to
Hmm.
laundry on program?
That's kind of a program specific question. And so we do have very detailed packing lists based on what is available for that particular program that you get after enrolling. Sometimes that looks like hand washing things, and the sink will offer or suggest bringing like a biodegradable soap like a Dr. Bronner's. And students will like hand wash, underwear, things like that in a sink. A lot of their programs are not wearing like a lot of heavy layers of clothes and they're in and out of bathing suits. So we get feedback from parents and students and instructors every year about whether what was on the packing list was sufficient based on the laundry facilities they may or may not have had access to. Generally speaking, most of our programs are not doing what you or I would call laundry at like in a proper washing machine. Some of the longer land-based programs will have the opportunity to do that maybe in the middle of the program. Um, we obviously don't want like tons of smelly or uncomfortable kids like running around on our programs. And so we intentionally design those packing lists based on what they'll have access to. And we're happy to answer that question in more detail based on a specific program to kind of get a better answer.
There was one about depth limits. What is the depth of dives that students are allowed to, or like
Mm.
how deep will they be going, I guess, for the scuba
Yeah,
trips?
it depends on the program and the age of the student. And so the quickest answer is that we use Patty as our certifying organization, and we are more conservative than what Patty requires or limits students to, both in depth and in the diver to instructor ratios. And so that's something that we use as our guideline and go kind of even a step back from. Depending on the age of the student and what certification they're working towards. We always start out shallow at the beginning. Usually our training dives are in places where you could stand with like a nice sandy bottom. It's not like a rough, deep, crazy ocean where they're doing their skills training in their first few dives, and we go gradually. And so they'll start. The first couple of dives are usually between 25 and 35 feet in their open water certification course. They'll go up a little bit deeper for the next third and fourth dives up to sort of 45 feet, 40, 45 feet. And then most of the dives that we do in our programs are between 35 and 60 feet. So not super deep, less deep than what they are allowed to do based on their age and certification level. And we can kind of explain that a little bit further based on a particular age or kind of what level you're going to. But um, yeah, more
Yeah.
conservative than what Patty recommends.
Yes. Can students bring snacks
They
with them?
can bring snacks. Yeah, I think especially picky eaters or students with a lot of restrictions, I think it's great for them to bring snacks, especially like filling like protein focused snacks that they can eat during the program is absolutely fine. Yep. Great for the plane, great for like supplements. We have lots of snacks on our programs. We're very snack happy. In our office, we're very snack happy. And so they will have access to a lot of snacks as well as meals and things like fruit and like peanut butter and jelly or things like that between meals as well. But yes, bringing snacks is also fine.
For scuba trips, what gear is required to be purchased ahead of time?
Depends on the program, but often nothing. So most of the gear, we try to make it as easy as possible and to really like keep the costs within that program tuition as much as we possibly can. And so for most of our scuba programs, they can borrow everything that they need from us outside of like bathing suits. You have to bring your own bathing suit.
Mhm.
And rash guards is something that they'll bring on their own, but you don't have to buy like BCD or regulator or mask fin snorkel even. Some of our non-Caribbean based scuba programs you can borrow gear from us that we'll send to you to take because we don't have bases full of gear in all of our locations. So it looks a little bit different based on the program. But for the most part, you're not buying any scuba gear.
Here's one I can answer. Is there a multi-kid discount? Yes, I believe 5%. I don't believe there's a specific like discount code or anything, but if you give us a heads up, hey, I'm going to enroll my, two students today, can you apply the 5% discount? Then we'll apply that from our end. Right. A question about student Zoom meeting for specific programs. That's not something we currently do. Kind of by design, we try to, or I guess if you're referring to like a one for other participants in the program to meet, we want students to come in fresh without kind of trying to look each other up on social media or figuring out or coming, kind of coming with preconceived notions and come in fresh. But if you have program specific questions, we are happy to set up a one-on-one call with our program director if you have questions about that anytime. So, any other questions live? I think that's all, and we are a little bit over time. So I encourage you reach out to Carly or myself if you have questions. I'll be sending the follow-up email, so you'll have my email as well. Also, feel free to schedule a consultation if you have kind of more specific questions related to a specific trip or two that you're interested in. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.